Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine, Tim. How are you?
Very well. Well, this week I got wind a couple weeks ago that there's Hulu is running a mini-series later this month, I think February 28th. It debuts. It's a 10-part mini-series, if I have that correct. The Looming Tower. It's based on Lawrence Wright's book, The Looming Tower. It's a drama mini-series. Is produced by Dan Futterman, Alex Gibney, and Lawrence Wright himself. And basically, it says the Looming Tower traces the rising threat of Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda in the late 1990s and how the rivalry between the FBI and the CIA during that time may have inadvertently set the path for the tragedy of 9/11. It follows members of the I-49 squad in New York and Alex Station in Washington, D.C., the counterterrorism divisions of the FBI and CIA, respectively, as they travel the world fighting for ownership of information while seemingly working toward the same goal, trying to prevent an imminent attack on U.S. soil. Of course, what this does is this perpetuates the narrative or myth that was cultivated throughout the 1990s, that bin Laden had declared war on America for reasons of the U.S. military occupying or being stationed on Saudi Arabian soil. This is the blowback scenario. And it also perpetuates the narrative or myth of Al-Qaeda as sort of a worldwide terror organization with a sophisticated and worldwide global reach, surpassing Hezbollah or Islamic Jihad. It's sort of a far-flung, sophisticated empire of terror without any clear, visible state sponsorship. So this is the narrative that the show is purporting. It also perpetuates the idea that it was the failure to communicate, sort of the failure to connect the dots, and sort of turf battles, which contributed to the success of the terrorist operation on 9/11. So that's kind of what the Looming Tower is. It looks to be rather well produced, as these things often are. So it's going to draw a lot of people in, as movies do. People's perception of reality is based on what they see on the big screen and the small screen, the television. So the Looming Tower and Lawrence Wright. What do you have to say about the Looming Tower and Lawrence Wright?
Well, it's just a steaming pile of rubbish. It's.
I was thinking of something else, but go ahead.
Yeah, right. I try to keep it clean, but it's just nonsense. I mean, look, I think that the statistics on the percentage of the population that don't buy the government narrative are trending against the government and the secret society. Hard to get data on this, but I try to, and it does look pretty clear that fewer and fewer people are buying it. And so this is to be expected, that they would go to the media outlets that they control and create basically a little more ratcheted down kind of mind control over what actually happened. So they roll out Lawrence Wright's book as a basis for a miniseries. And, first of all, as we discussed before the show, I mean, Wright is a member of the Council of Foreign Relations, which doesn't mean as, much nefarious input as it may have, 20 or 30 years ago, but it's still a very bad sign. And it's a very bad sign for America, just in a general sense, that you'd have our understanding of history coming from a group that basically comes from the Round Table, the Rothschilds, Milner, and the British Freemasons that established all of these councils throughout the world back in the 30s. And so this is, it remains to be seen if they can really stem the tide with this kind of stuff. They try to draw you in with the narrative of this confusion and antagonism between American intelligence agencies, like this is supposed to make the whole thing plausible. This is really what the basis of the propaganda is. Wright's book just, tries to find these little twists and turns that could bring about something so implausible. I saw him interviewed, and he's very slick sophist. He's very slick, very well trained, never really draws a breath. He goes and explains everything, in detail. He gives this ultimately nonsensical version of reality. But then the interviewer that I saw him kind of went in, well, what upsets you? And he started talking about basically conspiracy theorists. And it was fascinating because he kind of, at this point, his slick verbal capacity left him. And he was sort of stumbling, and he, but he said two things ultimately. He said, "Look, I'm angry about this, and there aren't any great mysteries, right?" He says there are small mysteries, but not any great mysteries. Okay, so this is it's kind of a quasi-limited hangout approach, similar to Noam Chomsky's, who says things like, well, after the fact, there's always little weird, unexplained things that happen in any, kind of large event. So these are mind control elements, try to get the public to basically, look over here, don't look there, kind of thing, where they take the public's curiosity and concern over, basically unexplainable phenomena in the government narrative, and they try to just render it as a meaningless concern. But unfortunately, in this case, Tim, the symmetrical collapse of Building 7 at free fall speed with the gigantic dust cloud, or these are all, aspects of controlled demolition. They never have ever occurred, nor could they ever, with any other kind of demolition. The three in combination are just, it's just overwhelming evidence. This would be able to get a conviction with any clear-minded jury in history. And then you always have, if that's not enough, you have the absolutely insane, description of the building having already collapsed from the BBC announcer. So in other words, you even have foreknowledge that's being given to the public. So the idea that this isn't a great mystery, well, these are mind control techniques that Lawrence is using to try to move people just away from the natural concern over these things. And in back of it all, he's got this his film footage, which is based upon his fictional book. So it just seems to me as it's there's just nothing here. But is the only question I have, Tim, is this desperate propaganda, or are they still in control with this kind of stuff? What do you think?
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's a very slick production. He is a very slick operator. I too watched a couple of his lectures, and he kind of pulls out the Syriana story, if you've ever seen that movie. He talks about, obviously, meddling in affairs of other countries and these things, and he comes across as being critical of U.S. foreign policy and other things.
Right.
But he talks about the source of anger in the Arab world, the humiliation that the Arab world suffers at the hands of the West since 1683, since they were repelled from the gates of Vienna, in one of his lectures. But it's and how this humiliation, the anger, he talks about the poverty that many of those in the Muslim or Arab world live in, particularly the Arab world, the Middle East, the corruption of like the royal family, the disproportionate wealth concentration in these areas, and how the city of Seattle has a greater GDP than the entire an entire nations over there, and things like that. So this leads to anger, which leads to desperation, which leads to terror. So again, he is supporting the official narrative, and I guess that it's that anger, humiliation. This is what causes buildings to collapse in their own footprint after being hit by a plane, right?
It just totally suspends the laws of physics.
The hatred actually supersedes, overwhelms the laws of physics.
Oh, sorry, you caught me off guard. That cracked me up. Yeah, that's right. That's what does it. It's just this
the same way that the confusion of the day. The people were so emotionally overwhelmed by the attacks of the day that enabled the BBC to foretell the imminent collapse, of Building 7 into its own footprint. So it's all very, wow, and these aren't just. Well, it's funny because I happened to be watching some of the. You can still watch the coverage of the day, how it went down that day on YouTube, and there's Peter Jennings there talking with various reporters, and they're talking about, how this is controlled demolition, and so they hadn't really been briefed it, I suppose, and everyone was talking about controlled demolition when it went down. Then immediately the day after, they stopped talking about it because that's what it looked like the day it happened. So
it's like they go black when the BBC reporter is talking about the Solomon Building having collapsed when it's sitting in back of her, still standing, and then they quickly cut. Lawrence Wright is an absolute liar, and I'm going to give just one example.
Joe, he's won the Pulitzer Prize.
I know they give, and Bob Dylan has the Nobel Prize. But I ain't gonna work on Maggie's farm no more. But I will work there if you give me the Nobel Prize. So, but he's a complete liar. And the thing that really cracked me up, because this is sort of a world that I spend some time in, is the title, "The Looming Tower," because this is just a great example of how the mind control works and of how they lie. The Looming Tower is from the Quran. It's a line in the Quran which Wright claimed that bin Laden used 3 times at this party. He was overheard using the expression. And the actual line is, translated from the Arabic, but it's like, wherever you are, death will find you, even if you are in towers built up strong and high. Now, Lawrence's point are looming, strong and looming. Mm-hmm. So this is where looming towers comes from. It comes from Surah 478, I believe. Yeah, 478. Okay, so it's just a line in the Quran, and Wright's claiming that bin Laden was using it because he had foreknowledge of the death that was going to come to the towers. I mean, bin Laden is just like the BBC announcer here, right? He knows that the towers are going to come down. And so he uses the line from the Quran at a party because that's his cryptic way of telling the other fundamental Arabs in the group that we're going to take the towers down. And Wright uses this as the title of the book, which with the idea that people will have bin Laden of having the foreknowledge, right, of the buildings coming down. Death will find you, even if you're in the high towers, right? Okay. Surah 478. Okay. Now, this is a complete mistranslation of the expression. What the Quran is talking about at this point is that those who believe, right? The Quran is saying, like at 476. I wish I had my notes, but I've lost them. Anyway, the Quran is saying that those who believe, right, will fight for Allah, and those that are believers and say prayers and do charities, like the Quran says, but who are, when they are issued the order to jihad or to fight, they will say like, okay, here we go. They will say, "Our Lord, why have you ordered us to fight? Would you not grant us the delay of death to our natural term?" In other words, so what this is about is followers of the Quran that don't answer the call to battle, and who they say that, well, we just want to enjoy the world. Now, then the next line is, "But wherever you are, death will find you out, even if you are in towers." So in other words, what it's saying is, and very, very clearly, is that it's not talking about hunting down infidels in high towers, just completely opposite. What it's saying is, if you're a Muslim and you don't basically take up arms to defend the religion, You can't go to God and say, "Hey, look, let me just avoid death." Right? I want to avoid fighting and death, because death is natural. It doesn't matter how much pleasure you have, how you build your tower up. Death is going to find you. This is just how the world is. Now, so if Bin Laden used that expression, right? The idea, he used Surah 478, saying, "Wherever you are, death will find you out, no matter if you're in high towers, lofty towers." He'd even been understood by a fundamental Muslim as being referencing some act of terror against infidels.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
It is not even possible. There is no way. It is just not there's no interpretation. There's no way you can twist it or turn it, that Bin Laden could be using that expression in the way that Wright claimed he was. He's lying. Now, moreover, let me just show you how much the lie is. Okay, now, as you may have learned over the last decade, many Muslims are very, very touchy about how basically literal you have to translate the Quran, right? They are very, very particular. It is against religious law to basically take stuff out of context. You can't take a quote that, the prophet is saying a specific thing to a group, and then say, well, I'm going to use it to advertise peanut butter or use it in a different way. You cannot do that. This is against the religion. Moreover, what is really just makes the whole thing hilarious is that Bin Laden was an Atari, which is the literalist school of Islamic theology. In other words, these are the guys that they don't want the words even like taken into modern language. They want to be able to understand them as the Prophet said them. The idea that Bin Laden would misuse this expression so that it completely changes what Allah had said, or excuse me, what Muhammad had said, to this modern vernacular. I mean, it isn't just a lie. It's not just a lie. It's flipping impossible. It would never have happened from Bin Laden. So you can see that you go, well, why would Wright use that expression if it's not true? Think about it. It's because what they did was they looked through the Quran. These would be the Council of Foreign Relation guys like Wright. They look through the Quran. They come up with a passage. They come up with a line, and then they take it out of context because it has the death for the people in the high towers, right? Mm-hmm. That's the only way this could have happened. So this is being done for the purpose of mind control. And Tim, it's from the very, very beginning of Wright's book, and it's the title of this creepy propaganda, stuff that Hulu's putting out. So anyway, it's I think I wouldn't be surprised if this gets some reaction from Islamic scholars. Wright got away with it when the book came out. But if this really gets like on a roll, people are like, talking about the looming tower, I think you're gonna have some people call him on it, because I checked with a couple guys that I know that are actually Islamic scholars, and they both said the same thing. They said this is absolutely BS, and they were angry. They were saying, this is obviously a lie. It basically insults Muhammad. Because he had this really clear way of trying to use the expression, and then to use it as where Bin Laden is now reworking Muhammad's, idea to turn it into murder of infidels. Man, I don't know. I think this could be a hornet's net if it gets rolling, because this really is just over the line kind of propaganda, and they are just misusing, the Quran.
Well, I think it follows the general plan there of creating sort of a blood libel for the entire Islamic world. It's something endemic to the Islamic faith religion. It's violent in these things, and these terrorist groups are a perversion of Islam, but nevertheless it is a branch of Islam that has to be dealt with, and these are terrorist organizations. And if you listen to a lot of his lectures, he'll talk about these various terrorist groups, even these terrorist cells, as being independent, when we all know these are all assets or patsies. If you have investigated any of the cases, whether it's the Fort Dix mass attack, or the group down in Florida, these groups, if you're familiar with Trevor Aronson's book, The Terror Factory, the FBI, maintains a stable of patsies so they can make these cases, make these busts. They'll encourage these things and string them out, and sometimes perhaps even allow things to happen. Not just Islamic terrorists, but there's suggestion that's what Oklahoma City might have been, and things like that. And of course, well, there's the '93 attack, which was an FBI sting operation, which has never been fully explained, but the evidence is very suggestive that it was either a sting operation gone bad or a sting operation that was hijacked by perhaps other elements within the intelligence agencies, like the CIA or something. Because
I tell you, Tim, I mean, these Arab must have been really well trained by the CIA or somebody, because that one guy makes that corkscrew turn, the jet plane right down into the Pentagon at 500 miles an hour, where he's like only 2 or 3 feet off the ground for 100 yards. I mean, hell, that's pretty good flying for somebody who just had could barely take off in a Cessna, wouldn't you say?
Well, they have their practice, they can do it. It's like he flew it like a magic carpet, right?
This is the thing. I mean, that's not even a maneuver you can really get to practice very often. You know what I mean?
I think they've tried in flight simulators. No one seems able to do it.
No one can even come close to it. It's just ludicrous. It's completely ludicrous. So that's the thing, is that, when you hear right with a straight face, this guy is just a sickening piece of work.
Yeah, and none of these things,
it's just disgusting.
One of the main characters, of course, in the Looming Tower is this figure, John O'Neill, this FBI agent, interesting guy, born 1952, of course. He reportedly died September 11th, 2001. He was the American FBI counterterrorism expert. He was a special agent working, where I guess along with the CIA. In 1995, he began to intensely follow reportedly to follow Al Qaeda after the '93 bombings. Now, interestingly enough, he was involved in the Lockerbie investigation. Not the Lockerbie. I'm sorry, the Pan Am. Not the Pan Am, the TWA 800 disaster.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And of course, he looks like he helped cover that up, which they blamed it on this fuel tank detonation. When I guess most of the evidence suggests that there was a missile that went out and hit this thing, but perhaps the one that was being tested by the U.S. military and then cover it up. At least that's what much of the evidence suggests. But he was involved in that investigation. But nevertheless, he's portrayed as sort of this hard-working, no-nonsense guy obsessed with hunting bin Laden, and it was, I guess, his turf war with the CIA and the State Department, which hobbled the investigation, the hunt for bin Laden. And interesting enough, he had his suitcase stolen from him, I think, down in Tampa, Florida, in the spring or summer of 2001, which led to him resigning from the agency after the Bureau after 30 years. And then he took a job as head of security at World Trade Center for Kroll Associates, or Kroll Securities, this this Wall Street intelligence security firm, which is Zionist, owned by a Jewish Zionist family, Kroll family. Then it was bought out by AIG. And this is Mo Greenberg, and this gets into some of the financial intrigues of 9/11. But he reportedly died on 9/11, on September 11th, 2001. So the guy who was hunting bin Laden resigned and took a job. He was recruited by this guy Hauer, Jerome Hauer, who is also another Zionist, Jewish Zionist. And so that he takes a job at World Trade Center and dies. And Jerome Hauer is the one that's supposedly identified his body. But that's quite a coincidence, wouldn't you say, that this guy who was working with Alex Station and working with the CIA and these things, and he ends up dying at World Trade Center.
Yeah, it's just shocking. There really is almost nothing about the official narrative that can be kind of can hold water to any scrutiny. I mean, it's one of those tangled webs that, you just have to basically, once the lies start, just keep lying about everything, and then you end up with Lawrence Wright giving interviews, about Bin Laden, and then he actually covers O'Neill, in the book, and he just tries to use it as basically not as a mystery that needs to be explained, but just as kind of reverse serendipity, and just try to gen people to have more hatred for this Bin Laden character and for Arab terrorism. When, I mean, the people that really should be getting this anger directed at them is Wright and the people who created 911 and then are using this crude mind control. One other little data point about Wright, other than his, just bizarre misuse of the Quran in the title, his lying about Bin Laden, using that expression in that way. Wright he worked in Saudi Arabia, supposedly getting information about the book. He claims that he wanted to start working on the book basically on September 11th. He was so angry. They always talk about the anger they have, like this righteous anger, because that's one of the elements of intimidation, keep the public basically, cowed down. So he was talking about how angry he was and how he talked to his publisher, and he said he wanted to do research and get this book done. But he said the Saudis wouldn't let him into the country. Right. The Saudis are supposedly, against investigation because they may have been involved. That's, obviously one of the cover stories now, kind of limited hangout approaches that they're trying to use to fool the public, this idea that the Saudis may have had something to do with it. No one's mentioning the Israelis or the Skull and Bones or any of these other organizations, but the Saudis, right, had something to do with this, one of the ideas. Well, anyway, so Wright, he says, well, I pleaded with them, but they wouldn't let me in as a journalist. So I realized I had to get a job. So the job he got was mentoring reporters, right? So this is what, they wouldn't let him in as a reporter, but they would let him in to be a mentor of Saudi Arabia reporters, which of course makes no sense. But he says, where they sent me, he says, I had a really good piece of bad luck, was how he described, because he says where the reporters were that I was supposed to mentor was in Jeddah, Bin Laden's hometown. Mm-hmm. I mean, just what incredible good piece of bad luck, that they not only let him in, they wouldn't let him in as a reporter, but to come in and mentor a Saudi reporter, that's fine, come on in. And where do they put him? They put him right in Bin Laden's hometown. This is one of the places that these guys trip themselves up. It's the circumstantial evidence, because that's harder, to control. This, I think, is just sloppy. He claims that that's where they sent him, when, the more natural explanation is that the Saudis know perfectly well he was in there for the purpose of creating a mind control propaganda piece to shape the public opinion. And so he needed to go to Jeddah so that he could get some, good factual information about Bin Laden. If you've ever read any of his stuff, he goes, I discovered that Bin Laden really wasn't 6'5" or 6'6". He was only 6'1", and he didn't really have $500 million. He may have had like $10 million, and like he has all these little details that he knows about him. He's just so knowledgeable. And then it makes the other, claims that he makes about Bin Laden, like he was the mastermind of 911, more believable, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, is the propaganda easy to see?
Yeah, I mean, it's well, one thing he does, what he does, he's when he's talking about the Looming Tower in his book, and you get the sense of the CIA not working with the FBI or the FBI not working with the CIA, and we're supposed to believe this is a turf battle, bureaucratic turf battle. They're not sharing information, and the problem is there's too much of a firewall, too many regulations restricting these agencies from working with one another and dealing with one another. And there's always the old bureaucratic turf, but FBI has always been competitive with the CIA ever since the days of J. Edgar Hoover tried to undermine the creation of the CIA when he started the he's the one that got McCarthy going. That's an interesting intrigue there. McCarthyism really was born out of J. Edgar Hoover's intrigues. At least that's what some people think. David Fenton, a while back, wrote a book called Disconnecting the Dots, and he meticulously researched what was actually going on between the FBI and CIA at Alex Station. And what he discovered wasn't so much bureaucratic bungling. There was actually a concerted effort to break regular procedure. This was also discovered up in the Minneapolis field office in the FBI when, lo and behold, that guy Spike Bauman quashed the attempt to get a warrant for Zachariah Moussaouri's laptop because they're so concerned about the Fourth Amendment at the FBI.
Right.
This 20th hijacker. Yeah, and this idea that these Arab names confuse you, but one of the terrorists they failed to tell the FBI that this terrorist that the CIA had been monitoring all around the world, the CIA failed to tell the FBI that he had a U.S. visa. I mean, he was coming to the U.S. soon, and he should be monitored. So all these little things, and he scrutinized the cables and the communications, and they're all withholding all types of information. That, coupled with the revelations of Michael Springman, I think it was at Jeddah when he was with the State Department, he was told to allow all these known terrorists into the United States as part of a training program that was being conducted by the CIA throughout the 90s. It was called the Visa Express program. They were coming in, sort of paperclipping these guys into the United States for purposes of training, because then they'd be shipped out to create mayhem in the Balkans or in the Central Asia, these things. And that's what was going on. That's one thing that Lawrence Wright completely overlooks in all his talks and all his writings. The fact that the history of Western support, particularly CIA, for Islamic extremism, and this type of Western support goes back into the days of the 1930s and 40s with the Arabs in the Middle East. What's his name's father? The spy. The guy back in the 60s. He went to Russia. What was his name?
Oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank.
Kim Philby's father.
Yeah, Kim Philby. Yeah,
he was an Arabist, and this wasn't done so much. They're Arabist and they're Zionist. In the British establishment, but not so much because they had particular love for Jews or love for Arabs, because they were an empire. They had to kind of go native sometimes, and so there's different strategies, just probably reflected a certain strategy. And then I guess after World War II, it switched, and the Zionists became dominant in the British and subsequently the American establishment. But it's all kind of the same game. So he plays that game. Like if you read the work of David Fenton, dots were purposely disconnected. So this is kind of like the Pearl Harbor excuse we get, where all this intelligence, no one was able to put it together. And so after World War II, we learned from our experience from the failure that led to disaster Pearl Harbor, we need a central intelligence agency. And just like in the wake of 9/11, we need a director, a national intelligence director, right? The new office.
We need snooping and groping at the airport.
Exactly. We need constant surveillance.
We just have to do it to protect you people. We're not creating a slave state.
Yeah.
Wake the hell up, people. Can't. Then, on one hand, you have an absolute ludicrous explanation. I mean, the official narrative is so ludicrous. People like Wright, I'm really amazed that they can do this with a straight face. Mm-hmm. I mean, their soul must be one mean little bastard, to be able to lie like that with a straight face. Because I'm absolutely positive someone like Wright, who actually knows a little bit about Islamic culture, wouldn't ever, mistake this Bin Laden quote as something that's legitimate, let alone use it as the title.
Or the history of Al Qaeda, how they kind of look.
The history.
It was just a mistake. But
then also, it's like, if you just look at all the absurdities, the corkscrew turn at 500 miles an hour. I mean, Tim, you got to. Have you ever flown a plane?
No, I'm not a pilot.
Okay, let me tell you. A corkscrew turn going down at like 110 miles an hour, you'd have to make dozens of adjustments. You could never hit the thing in the first arc that you'd created, right? It'd be impossible. So you have to make dozens of adjustments, but you couldn't do this at 500 miles an hour. It's just the laws of physics make it impossible. You would have to have exactly the right direction down and also turning at the same time. You couldn't do that accidentally or with eyesight. It's just not possible. The thing is just flat out impossible. It's just like the symmetrical collapse. It's just like the passport that was found on the sidewalk. I mean, these things are just ridiculous. And
and why that portion of the Pentagon? Why not the other side? Would have been much easier.
Exactly, where there was more stuff that's actually important. So, the thing is, look, the story is absurd. They come up with this really cockamamie stuff, which is almost now it's almost intellectual bullyism, because I don't even think it's propaganda stuff like Wright's material is. I mean, I don't know who takes this stuff serious. I guess some people do, but I
and what are all the financial chicanery? Not to mention that the day before that, Rumsfeld had announced the missing $2.2 trillion, and that's the part. It's the office that's investigating that gets bombed.
Right.
Hit by the plane, and all what was going on up in Wall Street, and the trading, the shorting.
People were shorting the lines and stuff. I mean, it's just sad and pathetic. The American people are sheep. They think they represent some kind of tradition of freedom and fighting spirit for revolution and their rights, but they don't. They're just sheep. And the question is as they start to understand that, and 911 is a great portal into this fact. What will they do? How long can someone like Wright even kind of be in the public eye?
Has he ever addressed like the stand down, like the failure for there are 35 bases that had aircraft in that whole zone. None of them seem to get a plane up.
Like he says, there were small mysteries, but no great mysteries. There's no great mystery. See, this is like it's the keep calm, carry on thing. They just it's just the idea whenever you're hit with something that is impossible to explain rationally, you just flip to the psychologic and say, stay calm. That's really, if you look at Tucker Carlson's response, when he was asked about Building 70 and being, could it ever happen accidentally? He goes, well, of course it can. It did.
It did happen, yeah.
I mean, so there it is. See, this is that you just flip into the psychological sphere with domination, which, in other words, look, everyone is intimidated. No one will say, talk about this. And the reason for that must be because it's not real. And therefore, I'm just pushing you back into silence. And so that just happens, all of the time. The whole mainstream media is basically designed like this. But, when you get into like Wright's talking about, well, this agency must have been doing this and that agency. Tim, I mean, this is like a zero dark 30, being used as the explanation for, like how bin Laden was killed. I mean, it's a fictional account of a fictional account. Everything inside those agencies had to have been controlled, had to have been basically under control of the secret society to even contemplate pulling off something like this.
Or the fact that the establishment press, this establishment that Lawrence Wright works for, doesn't even ask any questions regarding the bin Laden raid and his alleged death.
Yeah.
The fact that they just read it, they just report it like they're stenographers. They didn't question the fact that the government doesn't produce any body. The fact that the whole story of him being dumped at sea is completely ridiculous. There's no Islamic tradition burial at sea.
That was absolutely hilarious.
And no one questions it. I was like,
right. Yeah, well, that's it. They are, with 911, I kind of think that they took the position of, look, you guys, the public, you're so beaten down, you're so enslaved, you're so impotent. frankly, we really don't need to have a plausible cover story. We don't anything as elaborate as World War II or, the Gulf of Tonkin. We're just going to do something for fun here.
Well, you had pyrotechnics, and that's enough to...
Yeah,
right?
we had big explosions, and, people are trained into associate.
It's like a Michael Bay movie. Do you need a good script to get the people into the seats? No.
Not really. All you need is the explosions.
Just the explosions.
Yeah. I mean, like the thing that screwed up in 911, I think I mentioned it to you before, was that they intended to bring down Building 7 while the dust cloud from the Twin Towers was still there. I'm absolutely sure of it. That's what they wired it for.
There's some delay, yeah.
Yeah, so that no one could see it. And that was when they wanted to bring it down so that it would look like it had collapsed after being hit by something. And who's to say otherwise, because no one could see anything during this huge dust storm.
Because Building 6 had suffered some weird anomalous damage, appearing blowing up from the inside out that was apparently simultaneous with the buildings collapsing. So
that's what I was thinking, is that they're all just going to go up at one big ball of smoke and no one really could see anything. But then that screwed up, but they still had to bring it down because there was stuff inside. I mean, there was where all of the intelligence agencies had their headquarters.
There was a funny thing. I was listening to one of Lawrence Wright's lectures, and he was giving the audience an account. Apparently, he wrote the screenplay for the movie The Siege, which actually dates 9/11, which is kind of funny. But he was talking about after 9/11. He tells a story of the CIA coming to him and asking him to write a screenplay or a scenario if Bin Laden. I think this lecture is back in 2006 or 2007, so before Bin Laden was allegedly killed, right, in 2010, I think, right? 2010, 11. And he says, and they came to me and they asked me to write a scenario script of what would happen if Bin Laden, if we got him and killed him, which is kind of funny. And he goes, well, as a reporter and a journalist, I can't work for the CIA.
Right. That's really, I mean, it's just beyond, well, and he probably doesn't. I mean, where did the instructions come from? Well, he is a member of the Council of Foreign Relations.
And they coordinate those things. Exactly.
Yeah. And he's also a member of this Center on Law and Security, which is just it's just a big, fascist think tank. And so, that's the thing, is that they have this whole alphabet soup business to fool people, the CIA, the NSA. There's always hundreds of them that they can use. And, they can say with a straight face, I'm not a CIA employee. I've never worked for the CIA. I don't have any, how dare you think I'm a CIA employee? It's because once you posit the existence of the secret society, all of the agencies basically are able to, give instructions and there isn't anything that's without compromise. It's the secret society that is really what's important.
No, General Ed Lansdale, was with the Air Force. He wasn't with the agency,
right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, so it's just these agency alphabet soup stuff. It's just another. It's sort of like, well, they're skull and bones. They're not Freemasons.
Walter Winchell, William Perley. What was his name? The guy in London during World War II. Remember?
Edward R. Murrow.
He was an actor, an OSS agent.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I mean, so that's the thing, is that they have dozens of these agencies. They come and go. They, like Bohemian Grove now has, a day open for the public. Skull and Bones is now taking in minorities and women. So they can create these things at the drop of a hat. They aren't.
Yeah. Does Ben Affleck technically work for the CIA? No.
Yeah, of course not. No, I mean, I'm sure he does. But is he a spook? Yeah, he's a spook. I mean, that's the way the system is working, is that they are selected in some way. We don't know how the secret society, actually organizes itself, because it's a darn secret society, but we know it's there. You can see its effect everywhere. You can certainly see it in 911. And you can certainly see someone like Wright is involved with it. Now, how is he controlled? What level of understanding does he have? I don't know. But when you look at all the 911 foreshadowing, I mean, it was vast. There were dozens of examples of where 911 was appearing in movies, that it shouldn't have been shown.
Oh yeah,
up.
I mean, there was Arnon Milchan, this Zionist movie producer, arms trader, spy, SANM, agent for Israel, and there are thousands of them. And this is the what makes it so problematic when you're talking about a country like Israel and the Zionists who, no matter where they are, they have loyalty to their nation state, a particular intelligence agency or military agency. That's very problematic because they're informally their agents. For this. Yeah. And so, but I guess he's not on Mossad payroll, but he back in 1978 produced a movie called The Medusa Touch with Richard Burton, and it involved one of the scenes where a plane is driven into a building, a tower, a skyscraper, and explodes, killing everybody. In the plane, of course, and of course people in the building. And the plane is driven telepathically. That's part of by Richard Burton. That's that's what the movie's about. So here he is producing these movies back in the late 70s about these things. Of course, we have examples later. You have The Lone Gunman, who produced by Fox. These things, and that they foretell a jumbo jet being driven into the Twin Towers, and that's in the spring of 2001. That's foretold.
And then you got little curiosities. What was that piece of work? Zav. I mean, he was the comptroller for the Pentagon.
You
know what I'm talking about. And he's a dual citizen, but he's also on the board of directors of remote control jet plane systems, right? For flying them basically without pilots.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and
he was a controller for the Pentagon. The trillions went missing.
Yeah, that's right.
Zakon or something. Yeah, Zakon.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he was doing a great job. I mean, Rumsfeld goes, well, there's $2 trillion missing. I mean, maybe the guy should have been investigated. You think after losing $2 trillion?
His father was a Talmudic rabbi or something.
Yeah, high finance.
It's a systems planning corporation.
Right. Yeah. But I always thought that was kind of funny because if Rumsfeld says, well, we're missing $2 trillion, and then this guy is the comptroller, you go, well, gee, how much money would have to be missing before we would be a problem? Where we would have to maybe investigate this guy publicly.
Yeah, there was, and that's of course that's
$5 trillion. I mean, what would be the number? So the whole thing is ludicrous, and I mean, I actually think that at this point they're actually just they just think the public is so stupid that they don't really need to have much of a story. I think that's why Rumsfeld did it. I don't think there was any other reason than humor. I just think it was just something that was being done to ridicule the public.
Well, yeah, apparently that's another deep, or at least dimension of this is just how many dual citizen Zionists were involved, not only in the operation itself, but also the subsequent cover-up. Because you have Chertoff over there, who at the time was the Assistant Attorney General, which he quashed any investigation into the Israelis, got them out of the country, these things, and then he's also then becomes head of Department of Homeland Security. He cashes in on the underwear bomber thing with the scanners. He's representing the company, the Rapiscan, the company that makes the scanners. And it turns out the CIA put the guy on the plane. Of course, and then he tries to detonate a bomb on the plane, and the State Department admitted that he was put on the plane.
Right. So
it was another fake event, and these are terrorist attacks that Lawrence Wright cites as these Muslims. No, they're
I know exactly. These are the examples of this anger, which is creating the intellectual hysteria, which then is manifests as terrorism, which of course we must respond to with greater and greater government technological control over the population. It's just.
Have you thought about the Bush bin Laden connection? That's a whole another thing that Lawrence Wright never talks about.
No, that's it's funny, isn't it? Funny the things that he doesn't talk about with a straight face.
I mean, you would think just like it's almost like the. Ronald Reagan's would-be assassin, Hinckley,
Yeah.
his family being business associates of the Bushes, and the fact that Hinckley's elder brother was going to have dinner the night after with Bush's son, and you think that that would get some interest.
Right. You'd think it would be a little suspicious, but it's not. The public never really see. This is the thing: is that a couple of weeks ago you gave that fascinating synopsis of how America should work, and you talked about the role of the fourth estate. Well, that's one of the biggest problems, is that the media is completely controlled. It's just lock, stock, and barrel control.
Well, that's why they'll never cover this. That's why things like whenever they cover things like the JFK assassination or 9/11, they'll never, come forth with it or be honest with it, because
that's why, look, Wright gets a Nobel Prize for the Looming Tower, right?
Pulitzer Prize, yeah.
Sorry, Pulitzer Prize. Okay, so they give him the Pulitzer Prize,
which is really fitting considering who Joseph Pulitzer was.
Yeah, so. It does. In fact, that makes more sense. But the thing is that, well, wait a second. The title, if this guy is supposed to be doing research, where is a little bit of scholarship saying, it doesn't seem like Bin Laden was really quoting correctly from the Talmud, right? I mean, the bit of interpretation I gave, I guarantee you, I mean, it's just too simple to be wrong about. It is, as I described it, is what it is. It's just very, very simple. He's not talking about, Muhammad is not talking about hurting terrorists in a tower. This is completely a unique interpretation that Wright has, and Bin Laden could not have communicated to any other Muslim of faith using that expression in the way Wright's claiming. So my point is, well, how could this guy get the Pulitzer Prize? Where is it? I mean, don't they have anyone in this body that would look at this and go, hey, Lawrence, this is wrong. Your scholarship is atrocious. You should at least be trying to question the use of this expression. You should at least bring up its actual context in the Quran, but instead it looks like you're just using it for mind control.
Well, when you got the Pulitzer Prize, have you written a book with some Talmudic sayings?
Yeah, probably would have, but as long, but so anyway, so that's this, the Looming Tower is is a steaming sack of dung, and I can't even really recommend people watch it as as just to try to understand propaganda. You don't need to waste your time. Just assume it's propaganda, know it's propaganda, and then tell people, whenever it's discussed in your presence, look, do a little research, folks. This is not what happened. Wright is a shill for the secret society, and he's just creating a little piece of mind control.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah, little thing. I mentioned the Bush-Bin Laden connection. George Bush Sr., George H.W. Bush, and Bin Laden Sr. were long-standing business partners. George Bush Sr. and Bin Laden were on the board of the Carlyle Group. In fact, I think he was having a meeting that day of the attacks in Washington, D.C. I think George Bush had spent the night at the White House that weekend. But so the Bin Laden family actually financed much of George Bush's business operations. I think it was James Bath who facilitated a loan back in the 1970s. For George W. Bush, so the two were heavily working together. The Carlyle Group is a big, I guess you could call them merchants of death. It's kind
grain producers. They use more pesticides than all the world put together.
And not to mention, of course, Cheney's connections to Halliburton, which profited mightily from the War on Terror. And if you followed the work of Christopher Bolin, he studied the Zionist connections to the attacks in his books on 9/11. But he makes the point that when you're dealing with 9/11 and the War on Terror, both of them are false constructs built on one another. They're all built on one another, and so you have to tear one down to tear the other down. And all the war, all the invasions, Iraq. The invasion of Afghanistan, all the suffering, the millions of people who have died, and the refugees, these things are all a product of that 9/11 myth. And you're not going to understand how the world works. You're not going to certainly not understand recent history until you stop listening to people like Lawrence Wright and buying these narratives, which are just a superficial look at the evidence. No one can help conclude that this is all BS. I mean, because just look at the evidence. Ask these questions. Like, this doesn't explain the symmetrical collapse from buildings that are damaged asymmetrically. The controlled demolition, collapsing at free fall speed. The financial chicanery, the questions that arose. And no, it's just the connections before, all these groups that have profited from it.
And the bizarre piloting expertise, none of this thing makes any sense.
Or the fact that these terrorists were being, these alleged hijackers, there's no film of them getting on the plane. They have the film of them in Portland, but not in Boston getting on the plane. Yeah. The videotape at Dulles is fake. It's not. There's not even a timestamp on the Dulles videotape, security tape.
Now, the thing that I've always thought is the funniest is the 2-frame footage of the plane hitting the Pentagon. That is just a perfect conclusion to a guy who can't even fly a Cessna doing an absolutely flawless 500-mile-an-hour death spiral turn and hitting, square on at like 6 inches off the ground. The only thing that is more stupid than that idea is that the Pentagon would only have 2 frames of films.
Yeah, all the cameras all the security.
Yeah, this is like, how many cameras do you think they have around the Pentagon? Oh, I'd say they got more than one.
or in Crystal City in general, the city that rings the Pentagon, this military industrial complex neighborhood there, where apparently the FBI went in, I think within an hour of the attack and seized all the videotapes. This same thing occurred at Oklahoma City, by the way.
Exactly.
They never produced videotapes.
Well, and that's why one thing I've been advocating is whenever there's something that looks like a false flag, a big violent event, and you're part of it, for God's sakes, use the iPhone, videotape everything, and post it. Don't waste time. The more video feed that gets out onto the web, the faster, the better, because it makes it impossible for them to, construct some kind of fantasy explanation for the whole thing. Just get the videos out immediately. I really think that 911, as it was constructed, 18 years ago, I don't think it could be pulled off today. I think there'd be way too many videos of like the second plane coming in, whatever it was, and with the quality of the video footage, they just couldn't pull it off. So. That was kind of a point in time piece of government terrorism, false flag.
Yeah, it has to be different now.
I don't think they could even. I don't think they even contemplate something that stupid.
Well, do you remember? The propaganda was set up because I remember right after the attacks being misinformed in how the towers were constructed. I remember being told that there were hollow columns.
Right.
Right. So it's a complete misrepresentation of how the building, and this gets around, and it doesn't matter that it's not true. People hear it one time and they believe it and they stop thinking about it. Then they don't. Then if they're confronted with the contradictions, they don't compute it because they don't want to compute it because the implications are so disturbing. One interesting fact I found out is the a few years after, because of the problems with the forensics and the dynamics of the plane hitting the building and the collapse of these things, obviously that fueled a lot of the 9/11 truth community because it just simply didn't make any sense. So the laws of physics were being violated there. The idea that it was the trauma of the plane hitting the building, then the jet fuel that undermined the structure of the building, causing it to collapse the way it did, that's just absurd. Nevertheless, popular mechanics supposedly debunked the skeptics of the official narrative. And it turns out the editor of Popular Mechanics was the cousin of Michael Chertoff.
Right.
Chertoff.
I know. And it's just, they don't have much respect for the mental, power of the population that they would even, all of this stuff operates as intimidating elements, Popular Mechanics. People have been reading it since they were little kids, and they think that it's, just good, solid explanation of simple science, and you can trust it. Man, you can't trust anything. You can't even trust the cartoons that are on, the media has been weaponized.
It's funny you mentioned cartoons because the way that plane ran into the towers, it looked like a Bugs Bunny cartoon.
It did, when it just completely disappears, and then after a while there's an explosion. I've never seen anything so ludicrous in my life. I mean, literally, if there wasn't real people who were getting killed with the explosions, it would just be like a laugh riot. I mean, literally, it would be like the special effects would be in a grade B kind of campy Hollywood film, right?
What was the one film where the plane's nose comes through the other side? I know
that was in the Fox News.
It's actually mentioned.
The Fox News.
Yeah.
But I mean, just think of it as 911, the comedy. Where you've got the plane disappearing into the building, where you have the nose coming out the other side in another footage, where you have the lady talking about the building has collapsed, and it's sitting in back of her, where the guy comes up and he finds, here's the wallet. I mean, these are really elements from a comedy film. It's from something that's, it's a lampoon. It wouldn't even make it as a real Hollywood drama. This thing could only cut it as a comedy because it's too stupid. The things are just absurd. And of course, the symmetrical collapse. I mean, like you see, like there's different, 911 documentaries, and they're all serious, like Loose Change, I think that one I'd like to see is like 911 the comedy, and just it's like have a laugh track.
Well, are you familiar with James Corbett's thing, 9/11? Conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Was it like 3 minutes? He kind of deconstructs it.
That is kind of a cool. But I mean, I think with the video, I'd like to see like the videos and just the Pentagon explosion, the two frames, and just put a laugh track to it. Because that's really the way to unspin the propaganda. People should see this as absurd. When Noam Chomsky, when he gets up there and he goes, after these events, there's often unexplained phenomena. I mean, people should be laughing. This isn't serious stuff. This is like it's just stupid and funny. And that's the way a free population would respond. They respond first with laughter and then with, torches and pitchforks.
Well, when you're trying to solve like a murder mystery, like who shot John F. Kennedy, simple things like ballistics don't matter, right?
Right. Yeah, out the window.
It's like the same thing with these things. The collapse of buildings and these things. These things don't matter. And I understand that's not the only question because personally, I think tracking the finances and the connections is sort of this schematic of figures is probably from a criminal standpoint is probably more fruitful. But nevertheless, I'm stuck with these anomalies. The optics are very disturbing. They don't make any sense to me, and I don't know what it means. I mean, when I look at a plane cut through a building like that, does it mean there are no planes? I don't know. It just means when I'm watching on that screen, and most people, and this is my default position, 9/11 is most people experience 9/11 watching it on television. And that's a medium, and
sure.
that's subject to manipulation. I'm not saying why. I mean, why would you trust anything you watch on television?
Right. I mean, it's as real as like as a sitcom.
Yeah. I mean, I said, I've seen. I saw a T-Rex on television eat a man off a toilet. So in the theater, I watched the moon landing on television. So,
of course, you see all this thing; they're all on TV.
They're on television.
It's just, once you have deduced that the secret site exists and controls the media, man, it's all just a comedy. Mm-hmm. There's nothing out. I mean, then I guarantee you there are things on television that are real, of course. But there's no way that a layperson could tell the real from the fake. We can't do that. We don't know. We aren't in the room where these decisions are made. I'm sure they're going to find like, nitwit newscasters that will be basically legitimately conservative or legitimately feminist. I mean, we don't know if these people are all spooks or if they're just, personalities that have been picked out of the crowd. Who knows, right? You can't tell one from the other, but the secret society exists, and that that's really in play to create the overall phenomena of the media. And the only thing you can do about it is turn the damn thing off. You cannot expose yourself or your children to it. It is a weaponized phenomena, and it's designed to make you stupid and basically to genocide you ultimately. So turn it off. I've been saying, all along, and the alt media is there. It is available, and more and more people are participating in it. We need to set up some protocols. Basically, it'd be good to, that might be a show we do in the future, Tim, where we talk about the protocols that we need to establish in the alt media, because we can't control it. It'd be like herding cats. You've got 1,000 mavericks that are all, or even more, many more. But everyone has their own little media universe, and but in order to have the most effective kind of defense in the future for things like 911, what form, can the alt media take on? What would be some systems that we can advocate and that would basically help the alt media function as a whole, or if not as a whole, but just more generally effective, so that when the next 911 happens, we can get more information out, have more impact psychologically with the people that are, watching us rather than CNN.
Yeah, definitely. So, I think the first moratorium on accusing people of being shills and.
Well, that's the thing is, that's going to happen, and I'm sure there are lots of shills.
Yeah, there are, but I'm saying you don't know who is.
But the thing is, what I get accused of it all the time, and I also get trolled a lot because of like Caesar's Messiah. Even my book Shakespeare there are even people that are like hating on me because they love Shakespeare and they don't like my interpretation of that. But the point is look, don't worry about the personality, worry about the information.
Yeah.
Try to just stay with the information that someone gives you, and if that makes sense, then that is a better platform than just like character attacks of this person. Right now, there's just a lot of, and you see this all the time, where alt media personalities end up hating each other, and then they go after each other, or one person accuses this person. Well, what's the purpose? I mean, it's the information, not the personality. And so that'd be one principle: is just try to stay whenever you can with dealing with the inaccuracies of someone's information. We have to become a little bit more mature about just looking for fact or error in reasoning, and rather than trying to look at, personalities. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, I think Alex Jones is a shill. That's my opinion. And I've thought it for a long time because of the interview he did with David Rothschild, which I definitely think was, they were sharing kind of an insider humor about the secret society. Okay, so that was my interpretation. Does that mean that everything that Alex Jones says evermore is, false? No, I don't think so. I think that even a limited hangout like Jones can be useful. You just have to always be aware that he could be a shill.
Yeah, if he's talking about fluoride or vaccinations, it can be some useful information.
Exactly. Yeah. And so this is how we can defeat them from basically setting up shills, is that we're going to become really good at vetting information, and less will personalities become important, and more will just the information they give, and the way that information is being vetted with reason. You got to produce the facts, and you have to, like I would love to, and I'll put the offer right out. Lawrence Wright wants some publicity. I'll be happy to debate him. I'll do it right here on this show. And I mean, and the thing is that if you want to get into the arena of ideas and back up your claims, then Lawrence, just bring it on, buddy.
Well, listen, he says he doesn't believe in conspiracies. Well, wait a second. Yeah. What's the official narrative?
Right. Well, of course, it's right. I mean, we'll right off the bat. I mean, but that's the thing.
Prove that. I want evidence of that proven instead of this is the trick they pulled on 9/11, and this is what Chertoff did was they said it was an act of war. And once they did that, is they were relieved of the responsibility, at least rhetorically, at least morally, I guess they could say, at least politically, of carrying out like a criminal investigation, following rules of evidence and having to present the case. They never had to present the case. It's just like when the Bush administration was pressured to put a white paper on proving that bin Laden was involved in 9/11. They couldn't produce the document. In fact, it was the FBI a PR guy who was asked why bin Laden, on his most wanted page, he was the FBI's 10 most wanted on his web page, his most wanted page, why 9/11 wasn't listed as one of the crimes he was being charged with or being hunted down for. And Rex Toombs was his name. And he goes, remember that name, Rex, right? He goes, well, because we have no evidence that he was involved in 9/11.
Yeah, no evidence. Right.
So what does that say?
The media was touting him as a mastermind like 10 minutes after the fact. So
and then they kill him, of course, when he captured him.
And then they make a movie about him being killed. I mean, of course, but there's no evidence. So it's it's the citizen. We just have to try to organize ourselves so that we can think better, we can deflect the propaganda better, and ultimately, we want to have impact on the democratic process. We want to develop our own candidates. That's going to be a bit tough because now, you're up against money. But, I am optimistic just because there's going to be a lot of chaos as the mainstream media unravels. And I just sense that the alt media is becoming a more organized force. It's becoming, step by step, inch by inch. And I know people will always, this is something, Tim, that happens all the time. They go, oh, no, you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. The alt media, it's chaos and it will lead nowhere. Okay, well, that's one opinion. But if you look at where it is now as opposed to 10 years ago, I see the chart is straight up virtually. It's a lot better now. There's a lot more people aware of it. Now, does it still need a lot of improvement, a lot of, kind of organizational elements? Sure. It's got a long, long way to go. But man, oh man, there has been tremendous progress. So we have to have enthusiasm and energy and just keep every single day trying to make it happen more and more. Because, when you read or see the Looming Tower, you're staring right into the face of evil, right into the face of genocide. These people, they murdered all of these people in the Middle East, Tim. Mm-hmm. There's no justification. This is population reduction. And then they come up with an explanation, a just crazed explanation like, the Looming Tower. So this is their moral perspective. I mean, the moral perspective was identified by Fogarty and, other people that you have interviewed, like with the so-called potato famine, the Irish potato famine, which is actually the Irish Holocaust. We talk about, kind of following the money and, we can follow it right into Lord Palmerston, right, and the Irish potato famine, and then into the bizarre creation of British Zionism, that he was involved with in the 1840s. This is where we should be looking for the origins of the Middle East conflict. It's not in, bin Laden's, misuse of the Quran. I mean, so scholarship, inch by inch, we're getting there. Every single day it gets a little bit better, a little clearer. More people are coming on board. And if the universities that I have any relationship with or any indication, the classes now, each subsequent class has a larger fraction that doesn't buy 911 and is more and more likely to think about secret society, background. More and more people are not buying history as people are being given. And so, man, we got a long way to go. And, but nevertheless, progress is getting made, buddy.
Yeah. And at the very least, history is disturbing. It's a slaughterhouse, but the real history is far more interesting than the textbook of fairy tales we've been fed. And so,
yeah, that's right. And it's a lot more productive to spend the time, do the research, get into the real history. It's horrifying. because you really see how treacherous the world is.
But then it's also encouraging because this whole idea of this inevitable class of civilizations isn't inevitable at all. It's just a cabal of evil,
exactly.
Schemers.
That's exactly right. Is that the explanation that we're just destined to have world war after world war and genocide ourselves. If you really understand history, you can see, wait a second, that's just completely untrue. All of these words are totally artificial. All of this slaughter, 200 million people, that was all brought about by a very, very small group. And these people were evil, and the fact that the populations didn't rebel properly, that's the tragedy. That's what really we have to focus on, is making sure that doesn't happen again, is that we don't get led into another world war where they can just slaughter, reduce our populations with this cover narrative. That's really where we got to head people, is so that, that they are suspicious as hell of everything that the secret society is saying about, terrorism or, the events in the Middle East. It's like, right. He talks about Al Qaeda, but I mean, it's just one of these bewildering terrorist groups that pop up. They use them for a bit, they disappear. Al Qaeda started as basically the database. It's the base in Arabic, but it was the database. It was the group that had been identified as being able to fight against the Soviet fighters in Afghanistan. And it was purely a U.S. creation. And it was used in different ways. I don't think that we ever lost control over it. There was always some way of manipulating it. And they're just another group
they were brought into the Balkans and the Caucasus to tear those places apart.
I just think we should the correct way to think about the people inside of Al Qaeda is that they were as misused as the populations on either side of the trenches in World War I. In other words, we should be looking at these people as our intellectual brothers, because we are all being led to the slaughterhouse by the same group. They are able to control us through the control of the political, financial, and media, right?
Oh, it's so pervasive, because you just watch shows. If you watch just the whole, I was watching in The Sopranos, and the season I'm watching is in around 9/11, right after, and of course just references to Arab terrorism, things like that, are all throughout that's the backdrop. Of these shows, so it's just mentioned. It's in entertainment, and that
it's everywhere. Yeah. They just socialize us to think it's like a common thing that we have to fight against, and that's why we get groped at the airport. It's just a matter of being woken up. Where there's nothing real here in terms of this Arab terrorism. I mean, there is legitimate Arab terror, no question. I'm sure of it, but that isn't the driving force here. What is propelling it all is a secret society that then uses the terrorism as the basis for the NSA and all of the ratcheting control and the wars.
Well, it's like I guess it was Hezbollah, which was created by Shin Bet, to counter the Yasser Arafat, Al Fatah movement, these things, and then they may go a little crazy, they may go rogue or seemingly rogue, but then again, even when they go rogue, they serve the interests of the Israeli state. It was Victor Ostrovsky who, in his book, I think by way of deception, he was a Mossad agent who claimed that the Carlisha Jackal was a Mossad asset. He didn't know it, but he was. He was always controlled by Mossad agents, and that's his claim. He's a spy. He may be lying. I don't know. Ari Ben Menashe's book, Prophets of War, where he claims in that book he was involved in Iran-Contra, the arms trade, and these things, and the whole scene, this whole a netherworld of intelligent spies, spooks, mafiosa, drug trafficking, arms trading, these things. It's a whole industry. It's a whole grim industry. But he claims that the Achille Laura was ultimately carried out by Israeli intelligence. They set up these Muslim terrorists to do it, to give the PLO a black eye. And that's how you can look at a lot of these terrorist acts. Because if you look at it, if you really think about it, all these terrorist attacks, who does it? I mean, really, it's a bad PR. Who does it really help? But obviously, it gives the Palestine cause a bad name when some atrocities carried, especially when the media doesn't cover Israeli atrocities.
Well, yeah, and then when you look at how Israel has been able to build out, in spite of all these UN resolutions.
Yeah, the Odaninan plan, the Greater Israel,
the boundaries that it wants, and I mean, who's winning?
Yeah.
So it's just,
look at all the founders of the Israeli state. Yitzhak Shamir. I mean, he killed Bernadotte, the UN envoy to the UN back in 1948. The Menachem Begin, he signed the peace accords in '78 with Jimmy Carter. He orchestrated the King David bombing in 1946.
Yeah.
Ariel Sharon oversaw Operation Susanna, the Lavon affair.
Yeah,
so they're all terrorists.
Yeah. One show that I'd love to do, we should do in the future, is on the book, The Expulsion of the Palestinians. I guess his name is Nur Shahala, perhaps, and don't quote me. But I don't have the book, but I have lots of excerpts from it. And basically what he shows is the letters. He found the letters that the Zionist organizations exchanged between themselves in the 1880s, 1890s, from basically the generation after Herzl, where you have like Golda Meir and Menachem Begin and Ben Gurion, and like 5 or 6 other guys that either became the head of Israel at some point or very powerful politically, leaders in the army. So he has all their letters. And the idea that they would expel the Palestinians, and the idea that they would use violence to do it, and the idea that there was no moral issue in doing this. In other words, it was just like, for the glory of God or something, that these really weren't human beings, and that they would use deception for the rest of the world. These ideas are just being discussed point blank. There's nothing cryptic about these letters. So this is the
And the public is fed Exodus, the movie.
Right. We get exactly. Gosh darn it.
The Israelis are Paul Newman and Kirk Douglas, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so this is the public, like, gee, they're just so reasonable, and these vicious Arab terrorists, So it's just, the structure of the mind that, is in common function in America is a successful propaganda device to make Americans self-controlling, basically, seeing the terrorists, when in fact they should be thinking about what's in back of them. But,
Or just the history of false flag in the Israelis, or to make people look at more, at least wouldn't be so, wouldn't consider the possibility that maybe they had some role in 9/11 as being some sort of anti-Semitic slur or something, which they always tend to fall back on, when there's actually a lot of evidence that, at least at the very, that's an important dimension to those days' events, was the Israeli involvement.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's just, if you're thinking clearly, you're going to at least consider that as a possibility. And then when you see these insane, explanations given over the next 4 or 5 days, any normal person should just smell a rat. There's something wrong here with all of these details are being.
What was it? Within like 2 hours, they knew it was Bin Laden. That's Bin Laden.
I mean, it's funny. I actually whiffed. I didn't understand it as a false flag. I should have. I understood the concept of false flag then, but for some reason, I was swept up in it. It wasn't until a couple of years later when I saw the video of the Building 7 collapse, and that just absolutely was a devastating moment. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I spent months studying the thing, and because it just made me aware that there was a secret society, and it also made me aware that the media was fake. And those were hard things for me to really.
Was that Building 7?
Yeah, Building 7.
Yeah, Building 7 was for me within a few years. It's kind of funny because I didn't know about it for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I know. I'd never heard of it. Yeah, Building 7. They didn't talk about it much for some reason.
And then the moment that when I saw BBC reporting on it before it collapsed, saying it collapsed, it clicked in my head. That's foreknowledge, and that's when wait a second, explain this to me. I want everyone to explain this to me. I naively used to think if I would just show that videotape to people, that they'd say, "Oh yes, well I got to look into this." That's not the reaction I got. It just most people, family members, they just said, "No, that's ridiculous. I don't want to think about it."
Right. It's just something. That's the thing, is that it's the revolution of kind of normal consciousness that is required to take the step into clear-mindedness. But that's a step that has to be taken, and that's the step that we have to encourage.
It was kind of funny because I was already kind of familiar with the various. I wasn't really into the JFK thing, but I was familiar with the arguments, the problems with the official narrative and Oswald and this stuff. And I had heard about Pearl Harbor, and I understood why it would be an inside. What I mean by inside job is why would the FDR administration stand down, let that attack occur, and I understood the geopolitics behind it. So it wasn't a long stretch for me to consider that perhaps elements within the U.S. government, the power structure, the corporate interests, the banks, the oil companies, these things would orchestrate an attack or at least facilitate it to achieve some other objective. And so it's that type of sophistication which is required. If you're coming at it from a typical American, pro-American, the U.S. government's there to protect us, the sort of crude civic understanding people have, basically of life in America. What the meaning of civics in America? What does the government represent? What's the U.S. military for? And how are these agencies controlled? And how are politicians selected that we vote for? And these things, understanding the whole power structure, it's very difficult if you follow the sort of this textbook lesson of how politics works. And but if you're somewhat familiar with the history of false flags, the intrigues, and the betrayals that have occurred throughout American history and other countries' history, then it's kind of like, okay, I can understand how this might have gone down, so I'm willing to consider it, and I'll do the research and follow the evidence. But a lot of people aren't willing to do that. It's too disconcerting. It destroys their worldview.
There's too much intimidation.
That's true. The fear of ostracism, and one's career, one's social life is based on one's worldview and the loyalties that they've developed. It's almost like a brand loyalty you have, right? You have certain heroes, right?
And also you don't want to be singled out as being stupid or for ridicule. You don't want Tucker Carlson to get angry with you, and they would too. I mean, all of the media sophists would. They would not try to obviously debate, sort of the reason of like the symmetrical building collapse. They would go after you ad hominem, and they, I'm sure, would do it with a lot of viciousness because they would be looking for the right tone to intimidate.
If you were to point out the evidence indicating Israeli involvement, you must be an anti-Semite.
That's right, exactly. And they would do it with anger. I mean, they would try to really get angry.
And then you're confronted with unemployment and hunger.
Exactly, because they would go after finance it. But and I'm not advocating violence. I'm just talking theoretical. But the right approach, if like Tucker Carlson or like Anderson Cooper, if you ever get a chance to discuss this with them in public, with the cameras rolling, and they try to come over the top with anti-Semitism when they would back it up with an angry voice. The right approach is just to jump on their back and try to beat them up. I'm serious, because you see, the whole thing is you want to show the public, the rationales are just obviously insane. This cannot be something that can be defended, intellectually. So all they can do is like try to, browbeat you. But if someone responds with an equal kind of craziness, then the public that might free the mind. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. That would be something that like get people to go, wait a second, why is that person getting to yell at this person? And so it's that would be kind of maybe a little bit of humor, but not something that's very likely to happen. But I do think that one thing I would like to see is which is why one of the reasons why the mainstream media won't permit it is representatives that will not let themselves get browbeaten, actually come back violently. Now this is, and I'm talking about violently in terms of emotion, and with vigor and steadfastness, rather than just being pushed aside. But this is really an interesting thing, because you see, this is why mainstream media can never intersect alt media. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Their whole thrust is intimidation and a false narrative. So they cannot get into a situation where their rationale might actually be discussed using reason. This would just be completely insane and could unravel the whole thing. I guarantee you that that you're not going to have Lawrence come on our show and discuss this with us. It just won't happen. Wright will not show up because he can't. None of these guys can. Mm-hmm. I mean, they can only conduct the mind control on their structure. You cannot. They have to go to every forum they attend that's videotaped. They all have to be vetted, because if they actually says, well, I'm Tucker Carlson, I'm here to be on a panel discussing, alt theories of 911. And then you had like a couple guys who knew their stuff sort of give their thing, and then Tucker would give his. Because it would just be self-evident that he was just losing the argument. He can't do it. So they can never intersect alt media. And this is our great strength, is that we can call for debate and demand debate and ask to do it in public and ask to do it in writing and be bold. See, they're going to have to always run. They can never permit this. It just won't work. The only thing they can do is create basically false flag debates where they can get Tucker Carlson versus Alex Jones, and Jones will behave like a maniac. To create this impression that, well, this is the alt media. Well, okay, that'll work for a while, but that's also something that can be explained and the public can understand, and we can keep calling for them to come on our show. I mean, wouldn't it be great? We get a phone call from Wright, and he says, "Hey, Tim, Joe, let's go. I really like your stuff. I'm rethinking everything. I'm open, and let's have a discussion." Yeah, I don't think so.
No, he's Council on Foreign Relations, Pulitzer Prize, New Yorker Magazine, New York Times. He's just beyond our pay grade, and
well, that's the pay grade that they establish.
Yes,
beneath our pay grade in terms of like open-mindedness, but he is, he's in the pay grade of the secret society where they have their, developed scholars, in quotes, that are there for intimidation.
Mm-hmm.
And he's there to replace the aging Noam Chomsky.
He has all the prestige that the establishment has to offer.
And they need every bit of it.
Yep.
They can all the prestige they want, Tim, but they cannot debate, not in public, not against people who are.
Well, that's the funny thing. I remember because the guy was introducing Lawrence Wright, and he giving his bona fides, his curriculum vitae, and these things, and he goes, "Hey, he's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations." Now, how many people will go, "Oh, really? Oh, well." It's like that builds confidence.
I mean, you're supposed to be an objective historian. You're working for the Council on Foreign Relations. Why doesn't he just have a sweatshirt with CIA written on it?
I know. It's like
he's a member of the CIA team, here. I mean, so that the public doesn't have any confusion about what he is. Yeah. Well, look.
So okay, I think we got it covered.
We got it covered, brother, and next week is going to be even more exciting.
Okay, Joe. Listen, enjoy your weekend. We'll be in touch.
You too.
Thanks.
I'll talk to you soon, Tim. Bye-bye.